Okay, Carla, we can get started.
Wonderful. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the Kansas Arts Commission 2025-2026, How to Complete Your Final Report. It's the overview for general operating support, arts everywhere, and public art and murals, and visiting artist grant recipients. If you could, please have your cameras off and microphones muted, and feel free to write your question in the chat, and we can include those question and answers at the end of this presentation. We'll review those. This 2025-2026 final report's located in Submittable. So this is the forms that are in Submittable. And this recording will be located on our Kansas Arts Commission YouTube channel under How to Complete Your 2025-2026 Final Report webinar. And my name is Carla Bauer Tate, and I'm the Arts Program Manager Consultant. And Kansas Arts Commission staff, could you please introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Kate Van Steenhouse. I'm the Assistant Director.
Hello, Gabriel Ortiz, Data Manager.
Thank you. So for the grant period of performance, we first want to just thank you for your work this grant cycle. And your final report is about the grant activity that happened during the period of performance from July 1st, 2025 to June 30th, 2026. Make a note that your final report is due July 31st, 2026. So that's in a couple weeks. Please note the grant will remain open until the final report is submitted, and submissions of this report is a required condition of your grant agreement contract. Also, if you've not submitted a request for payment form, if you could please do so as soon as possible. And if you're currently awaiting a submitted request for payment, please contact Gabriel Ortiz, and he's at gabriel.ortiz@kansas.gov for status updates. Our agenda items for today will be the final report overview, the expenditure log overview, and then we'll have questions and answers. And again, put your questions in the chat and we'll review those later. So for
Okay.
the,
Oh, sorry, Carla.
go ahead.
I was just going to say the purpose of the final report, just at a high level, is it's really to collect information about the impact of your projects. So, what succeeded, what didn't go as planned, any unexpected outcomes or learning that took place because of this work that you did. And it's really your opportunity to share both the data, like the numbers, and also any stories about the work that happened. We use this information at the state level. We also pass it up to the NEA. And so it's a really, like, this is kind of our main way to understand and then also communicate about the impact of arts and culture across our state. So one way to think of it is we often will get a call and someone will say, could be a legislator or someone from the media or just someone from another division within state government, and they'll say, like, oh, hey, what great projects happened in this county over the past few years? Or, what's happening in this region? And when we get asked that, we turn to the final reports to find the information because our memories are not that great. So, the report is your chance to really highlight your activities and demonstrate, like I said, how the arts continue to strengthen our communities. So please think of it as an opportunity to brag. Tell us your stories and share your best images too, because the images you share in the final report, there is a little note there that by adding these images, you give us permission to reuse them for promoting arts and cultural programs. So show us the best that you've got, and there's a high probability that your images will also get reused either on our website or in other Department of Commerce publications. So um, it's a good opportunity. And then also, we also really value just candid information about how things went. Like this doesn't have to all be rose-colored glasses, right? Like we also use these final reports as a way to learn why things maybe didn't work out as planned, which is perfectly okay. We want to hear what you learned. We want to hear what new questions you have. And also, the data and the information that you give in these reports helps us identify trends, hopefully streamline administrative processes, and also design just any kind of technical assistance or responsiveness. So, for example, in 2022, we noticed at like the tail end of COVID, we noticed a huge uptick in the number of communities wanting to do large scale murals. And so through that, we started our public art and muralist roster, and we also held a whole 2.5 day conference about mural making. And now we have all those resources on our website. So again, the final report is just a great place to give information. A couple nitty-gritty things that we'll get into over the course of this webinar. You will fill out and upload an expenditure log that shows how the grant funds were spent, and Gabriel will talk a lot more in depth about that in just a little bit. As I mentioned, you'll upload images, both from your projects and also images that show the required crediting statement or usage of the Arts Commission and NEA logos. For public artwork and mural projects, in the grant agreement, there is a requirement that you have signage on site that includes the name of the artist, the title of the work, um, just any pertinent information that relates to that grant, and also acknowledgement of the funding from the Arts Commission. So you'll be asked to upload an image that just documents that whether it's signage or a plaque or something, you'll upload something that shows that documentation exists. Um, and lastly, just please note that all grant activities and expenses should have been completed by June 30th of this year. So unless you've received an extension, all of your project activities and expenses should be finished by this point.
As a reminder, here is your project budget from your contract agreement looks like. This is what you filled out in the contract details form last year to show how you were going to use grant funds and how you were going to match it with your cash and or in-kind. Keep this project budget nearby so you can use it as a reference when filling out the expenditure log. Please do not upload this contract budget in your final report. Only the expenditure log will be accepted.
Okay, so this final report again is located in Submittable, so you can access the report by going to Submittable, locate your submission, click on the Forms tab, and then scroll down until you see the attached 2025-2026 final report. That will be the name of it. And you will complete the expenditure log that you've already started to show how your organization spent the total grant fund amount and your total cash in-kind match. You will use the same spreadsheet and add your remaining project expenses and payments to it, and then upload that expenditure log into the final report. So please make sure you also are rounding up to the nearest dollar amount just to keep everything simple. For public art murals and visiting artists, the expenditure log Excel spreadsheet is in your request for payment form. So just please reference that and update it and use that same one to upload to the final report. Remember not to include your organization's entire project or operating budget in the expenditure log. The expenditure log should only list the KAC grant amount you spent and then the expenses you covered with cash and or that donated in-kind match. So here's an example of what the expenditure log will look like once you fill out the different columns. It's just very important to include the required information and submit the information correctly to be able to process and formally close the grant. So here's just an example of it, and there's a few line items that are filled out. So let me review each column with you and kind of explain what each one of those means. So it's best to reference your project budget from your contract agreement, what David just said, when filling out this category and description columns, especially. Also, please do not group expenses together. So each expense that you have must be listed on its own line item. In the description column, this is a service that was provided, so such as administrative assistant. Um, just a reminder, please don't use a person's name in the description column. You want to put what the service was that was provided. Enter the transaction number in the transaction number column. This can be a receipt number, a check number, a credit card transaction number, how you track your payments number. This is just a way to keep track of your payments. And because if there is an audit, we will ask you for this detailed information. So please make sure that you're filling out the transaction number. For the date, this is the date that you paid for the expense. And the payee, of course, is self-explanatory. It's the name of the person or organization you paid, or that person or organization that donated the in-kind. For the grant funds expended column or grant funds that was spent, only list the amount of KAC grant funds you spent on this project. And then the cash matching funds spent, again, only list the amount of cash matching funds you spent. And then in the in-kind match spent, this is enter the amount used of in-kind donations that you had used for matching funds. And then lastly, the total matching funds expended. So on the top of the expenditure log, this will calculate everything automatically. And then just reference these amounts to verify if you have spent your total grant amount, and then you've also reached your match.
Okay, these next few slides are examples of some common questions regarding how you should fill out your expenditure log.
Okay, question we often get. Can I group all my administrator salaries together on one line and just list the dates of when they worked on the project?
For this one, no, each payment needs to be listed as its own line item. In this example, Jane received 3 salary payments, so each total transaction should match the amount on each check or deposit. Then you can split how much that you want covered by grant fund expenditures and how much you wanted counted in the match expenditures.
All right. Next question. What if my receipt includes other expenses, things that I bought that aren't going to be part of the grant project or aren't covered by the grant funds?
And this, if your receipt shows other expenses that aren't part of the grant project, they should be they should not be included in the grant or match section. Since extra items you bought at Home Depot in this example aren't part of your grant project, you would put the total receipt amount in the total transaction of 856 here and only claim 850. Don't claim the other $6 of non-project items on your expenditure log.
Okay, what if we have someone on staff who helps with administrative work, but who also is like a project director or a teaching artist? Would I list them as administrative personnel or programmatic personnel?
In this case, we'll go ahead and split it appropriately. For example, if someone did both administrative and programmatic work, allocate their payment proportionally between those two personnel categories. Keep in mind at this point, keep what you originally put in your contract budget.
Okay, so speaking of that contract budget, there's mention of this 20% rule, but what is that? And what if the categories my expenses are falling into on the expenditure log are different from what I originally put in my contract budget?
So you want to stay within the 20% flexibility rule. In the contract, the change of orders rule is that expenditures should not vary by more than 20% in any category. So if my expenditures are 20% less in a category, like in this case for marketing, the contract budget had been $1,000, but only $750 was spent. At this point, we have two options. We would need to find additional expenses inside the marketing category to be within the 20%, or use expenditures from another category, which may lead us to a contract budget amendment. For expenditures that are more than 20%, the solution is simpler to resolve. Here's a list. Here, you listed the contract budget $1,000 for artist fees. In this case, another artist was added to your event and charged you an additional $1,100. So your artist fees ended up being 2,000 actual total dollars spent. So you're $1,000 over your stated in your contract budget. This makes you the 20% outside fees and services. You don't have to claim the full artist fees for the 2,000. Only list what you need from the transaction total to equal 20% or less, which in this case we claimed $900 for Rick Adams, but we only claimed $100 on the expenditure log for Brian Springfield, the additional artist, which totals $1,000. This now equals the contract budget amount. If you are unable to line your category totals to what's in your project budget, please contact us, KAC staff, and we will work with you on adjusting your expenditure log and determine if the amendment is needed.
Okay, so how do I list in-kind contributions on this form? There's no transaction number for a donation like that. So what do I do?
Okay, so you would list as a separate line item with the calculated value for each donator. Use NA for the transaction number and include the donor's name or the organization that provided the donation. All in-kind donations should have a signed document by the donor per best accounting practices. So here on this example, we would show expenses on the expenditure log. So XYZ organization had a signed invoice from AV Sound with 3 hours of services for $1,000 per hour. The total of the worth of the services is $3,000. They kindly gifted the 3,000 as in kind. You would list that 3,000 in the in kind column.
Okay, so here's a full expenditure log. A few things to keep in mind about the expenditure log. Please don't include your organization's entire project expenses or your operating budget in this expenditure log. This should only list the expenses you paid for either with Kansas Arts Commission grant money and also the expenses you paid for, whether that's cash or in kind, to demonstrate that one-to-one match. So, for example, if your grant award was $7,500, but your entire project budget cost $40,000, you don't list a full $40,000 worth of expenses on this log. You would just show how you spent the $7,500 in KAC grant funds and the $7,500 in matching funds. So, and that can be again a combo of cash and in kind, depending on what was in your project budget. You only list the expenses that were associated with the KAC grant portion of your project. So this, as I said, this log shows 7,500 as the total, and then the cash and in kind to match that. So the final total would be 15,000 for a $7,500 grant.
Okay, so this section is part of the final report form. And again, remember, please round to the nearest dollar amount for each entry. And I'll review each one of these, but I do want to point out that on our form, we do have a detailed explanation under each field, just so that you can look at that and make sure that you're completing that correctly. So please refer to that. The grant amount spent refers to how much of the KAC grant award you actually spent that was related to the project. The actual total cash expenses section, this includes all allowable expenses related to the project, and make sure you include what you paid for with the grant funds plus what you paid for with your cash funds. So on this line item, no in-kind is included here. The GOS projects will be the period of performance of July 1st, 2025 through June 30th, 2026. So your numbers here should be higher than your grant amount. And then just make sure that you don't include any ineligible expenses in the report. The actual total cash income section, this includes all allowable income related to the project. And just make sure you include the money received from the grant funds, plus any money you receive from your own cash funds for the one-on-one match. So list your income. And then again, no in-kind is included here. Your actual total in-kind contributions in this section include the actual total value specifically given as an in-kind donation. And just remember, it's helpful to just remember that in kind means no cash actually changed hands. It was a donated. In kind can include all volunteer and/or donations to the project. And please, again, refer to the additional instructions located under each section on the final report form that explains in detail what is needed. And then just make sure that you're referencing your guidelines and again, that contract budget to just also understand what are eligible and non-eligible items. Okay, so let's talk about the project activity locations section. And this again is part of the final report. And we ask for this information and are required to report it to the NEA so that we can gather data just such as this. The address, we want you to list either the address or latitude, longitude to be entered in this first column. You don't need to add both. So either just enter the address, or if you don't have the address of the facility, list that latitude and longitude. Please don't include the name of the venue or location in the entry. If you don't know the address and aren't able to look it up, just use latitude and longitude found using Google Maps, sorry. Again, we only want the address of the locations where you held the grant project activities. And it's very important to include the number of days at each location the grant activity took place. This is one of the main items that's left off of the report. And we need to make sure that you, again, have the number of days column filled out. And if you don't, we have to send back the report to complete the item. So please do that for us. For projects that involve a permanent installation, like a public mural, just enter 999. And if you do have more than 19 locations, just reach out to us and we'll help you add those.
As a reminder, your final report is due July 31st, 2026. If your report is not received by 11 p.m. on July 31st, it will be considered late. Reporting history will be provided to panelists for all future KAC grant applications, and your organization will be marked as being non-compliant. Payments will not be available for any 2026-2027 KAC grants or any other Department of Commerce grants until the report is received.
So we'll include a link in the chat to make an appointment with Gabe for one-on-one help regarding filling out your expenditure log. And again, as always, you can contact your art program manager. Here's a list of the KAC staff. And or our general email box is arts@kansasks.gov. And then always feel free to join the Zoom office hours with KAC staff to review items or ask questions. There's no appointment necessary. You can just access the Zoom and be able to talk and ask your questions there. And we actually will be having a Zoom office hours today, right at 2 p.m. Central Time. So if you do have any additional questions, please feel free to join that. Just some reference items. The 2025-2026 final report, again, is located in Submittable. And you can access that form by going to Submittable, locate your submission, go to the Forms tab, and then scroll down until you see the 2025-2026 report. And remember to have your contract project budget readily available because you will be referring to this document to fill out your expenditure log for the final report. And all of the grant materials, including the full grant guidelines, are available on our Kansas Arts Commission website. You can just search Kansas Arts Commission and then search grant materials, and it'll pop right up and you'll see all of the links to all of this information. And then I can please strongly remember keeping the guidelines nearby as you work through this process, and that document will answer most of your questions that you'll run into. At the back of those guidelines, that document, you'll also find an excellent definitions section, and it explains key terms used throughout these forms and throughout this process. And it's a really great reference and makes the process much easier to navigate. And it also, we want to bring to your attention and make sure you check your spam folder. A lot of times the Kansas Arts Commission emails are sent from, well, our Kansas emails are sent from firstname.lastname@kas.gov. Make sure that you're checking your spam folders because sometimes our emails do get caught up in that folder.
Okay, we just have a couple of questions so far, but I would encourage anyone with any questions at all, feel free to drop them in the chat or in the Q&A. Our first question is, should we list cash donations that were received at live performances, A, in the expenditure log, or B, in the final report line that asks about total cash income? So this is a great question. I'm so glad you asked because people often get a little confused with the expenditure log and expenses versus income. So in this case, if you are receiving cash donations at a performance, that would be income. And you can include it, and you should include it as part of that final. Carla, can you easily go back to slide 13? Um, so in these questions where it asks about total cash income, that would be an appropriate place to list that. An in-kind contribution in this case is referring to, even though it's a donation, you're receiving a donation, that's not considered in kind because it's a cash donation. When we speak about in kind in terms of the expenditure log, we mean it in terms of donated goods or services that function as an expense. So it's something you didn't have to pay for because someone donated it instead. Okay, so the short answer to that question is that should be listed in the income section.
I got
Um,
one more thing to add to that.
yeah, go for it.
Think of the expenditure log as what the NEA or what KAC will come in and audit. So the amount of documentation will have to match up line by line in the expenditure log only, not in the project totals.
Yes, thank you. That's a great way to just think about it. This section here that is on the screen now, this is about being able to report kind of big picture grant project data, but the expenditure log, that is what you will be accountable for in terms of, yeah, if you were to be audited, those are the receipts that you have to have at the ready. Okay, next question. We are confused about how to answer the question on the final report that asks about employees at our organization. Okay, so we applied as Kansas State University, but we are a volunteer project run by 2 professors. So is it correct to list number of employees at KSU or 0 for those of running this program? In this case, it would be 0. Yeah, because that's the specific answer for this grant project, even though obviously, yeah, K-State has a lot of employees, but but the more specific answer would be 0. Any other questions? These are excellent questions, and I think a good rule of thumb for questions like that, like how many people do we list? Um, the answer you want should be that which best reflects your grant project. So again, um, like in that case, what gives more information about your specific project is the fact that it's run by two volunteers, not the fact that K-State has thousands of employees, right? Okay, one more question. If a grantee was admitted a project extension of up to 1 year, will this final report still be active within submittable? Yes, it will. Um, when you are ready to submit, anyone that received an extension, whether it was a 6 month or 12-month extension, um, your final report will still be due 1 month after the end of your period of performance. And it will be available in submittable. Yes.
Reach out to me if it's still on there. I have taken a couple off that were due on the 31st, but if you have gotten an extension and it is still on there, make sure to reach out so I can get it off there.
And a question about second payments. The question is, can we submit our final report before receiving our second payment, or will we need to wait until that is approved and dispersed? Um,
The 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 question is, or the answer is right now, as soon as you get your expenditure log in after the 31st, then it will be on delay until you get it in. So right now, if I have the information, then I can definitely get it out. I have sent some out that are still in the process with the fiscal department. So just reach out to me if you haven't got an update for me yet.
Gabe, I was gonna say, tell me if this is the right way to think of it. The best thing to do is to wait because the information in the expenditure log for your second payment is the same information you're going to need for your final report expenditure log. However, if it's getting down to the wire, in terms of the deadline, Gabe, would you prefer that people go ahead and submit their final report with the expenditure log they have, and then we can update it later, or would you rather have them completely hold off?
The first or the second payment actually only has to, dictate how they spent the first half. So technically, you don't have to turn the whole one in um,
Oh, I
for
gotcha.
the payment. If you want to at this point to submit the whole thing, and I could tell you, you're good to go for the final report, I can definitely do that. But it is better to go ahead and get your final report in on time, even with the final log not complete, because we will revisit that on everybody's log. We will run through and make sure everything makes sense on the log, all the transactions are numbered, are there. Um, so we will go back. Um, the staff will go back and revisit each log um, sometime within the next, 3 to 6 months. So if you don't have it completely filled or completed, that's fine. Just get it in there. And you can tell me or Carla, and so we can put you on the list to go back first and try to get those corrected.
Okay, thank you. Okay, question in the Q&A. Should allocations from our local city be included in our project in our income number for general operating support? In that total, when you're reporting on your total income, if allocations from the city are part of that income, then yes. Another question. Have trouble with the section about uploading additional material for a general operating support grant. Um, that's the section where it's asking for additional material. Again, that's kind of your chance to brag or to, upload if you have brochures or programs or short video that may have been produced as part of your work. Like that's a chance to really kind of showcase what your organization did. And for general operating support, your grant project is all of your operations. So that additional material section is really is your opportunity to communicate about your operations and everything that you did. If you're having technical trouble with it, then just contact us and we can help you with the form side. If there's it could be there's a file type that's not accepted, or if you're having a technical upload issue, then just reach out to us and we can help. Okay,
Hold on, Kate.
question. Yeah.
You can also include in that section, um, if you did have more than 19 locations, that's where you can put that form. So that way
Mm.
you don't have to send it by email. And also if you're a PAM or visiting artist and you didn't include the payment, like the payment check, the last payment checks or anything like that, you can also put them there so we'll have them on file.
Great. Okay, other question in the chat. If we've used a debit card to purchase items and therefore don't have a check number, so what do we use as a transaction number? So for that, think of that transaction number as if and when this grant were to be audited, what information would you need to be able to quickly find that specific transaction, right? We're not asking and requiring grantees to upload copies of checks and receipts and whatever. The expenditure log is it needs to be as thorough as possible because we're asking for it instead of collecting all that information from you up front. So if you don't have a check number, there should still be a transaction number that goes with that debit card purchase. Or if you're using like a QuickBooks type system, there will be a transaction numbers that just is an identification number for that transaction. Just whatever internal tracking system and tracking number you would use, that's what you want to list there. Because an audit can happen anytime in the next few years. So think about it, if 2 years from now we call you and say, hey, our auditor from the NEA is asking about what you bought at Home Depot on November 1st, 2025. So think about like, oh, what information do I need to have in my files to be able to pull that up quickly and easily? And then that's what you use as that transaction number. Gabe, is there anything else I'm
Um,
missing?
like another way for debit cards that you could do it is you can um, get a bank statement and put, like UMB Bank and then kind of write the date on that thing. So you would know that you can pull up your bank statement um, with who you paid on there. Immediately that would be a way to track it. Um, and then reach out to me if you really don't quite know what to do, and we can kind of problem solve that.
Thank you.
Also, Kate, just to add, please make sure you're keeping all of that support information, example, invoices, receipts, all of that for at least 3 years. Did you already state that?
It never hurts to be restated. So thank you.
Okay, yes, 3 years, please.
Okay, to clarify, for personnel expenses, we had two employees paid over 26 pay periods. Does that mean you want 52 line items reported? Uh, Gabe,
Yes.
that's a yes, right? Yes.
Yes, that is because uh, they want to know if some audits are line item audits. They'll come in, they'll pick 5 lines, and then once those match up to the receipts, then they're done with your audit. Some of them will be full forensic audits. So if you get pulled and they're just doing a simple line, you'll be done. Your audit will be done right away. Um, So you want to go ahead and list everything. If it goes beyond the 50 or 100 that it asks for on the expenditure log, reach out to us and we will give you either a bigger log or just an additional add-on to what you already have.
Any other questions? Well, if the second we end this webinar, a question comes to you, um, I dropped the information for office hours in the chat just a little bit above, and Gabriel will be on there this afternoon. We're doing office hours 3 times a week we'll probably do that probably through the end of August. And then we always have Thursdays at noon. We'll keep that all year long. So anytime you have a question, you can pop in and chat with one of us. And um, our emails are also in the chat and on the slides. But I think that's it for questions for today.
Well, so we've reached the final step, and it's actually the best one, and that's the step to celebrate. So you've wrapped up your project and you completed your grant requirements, you've uplifted your community, and you've added another bright chapter to a remarkable year of the arts in Kansas. So here's to another wonderful year of creative collaboration and the sharing and the joy of strengthening our vibrant Kansas communities, one project at a time. This concludes a webinar on how to complete your 2025-2026 final report. Thank you all so much for your time and have a wonderful day.
Thanks, everybody.